Thank you for inviting me. I'll
Oh,
say it again. Oh, hi, there we are, I think. It says live
oh,
on Facebook.
okay.
This
Thank
might be happening.
Awesome. Just see about me getting my things refreshed here. It looks like I'm live too. Oh, yeah. This is really cool that we're able to do this. I was talking to the guy on the radio today about we do have some technology issues with it, but the logistics make it so much easier than trying to bring someone driving, especially in conditions like this.
Oh, right. No, and actually there are a lot of benefits to having a book published in a pandemic. I'm saying that it's kind of a laugh, but there actually are some benefits to it. There's been some trials too, but it's going, it's going well.
Good. Well, because we're live with an audience out there, we're going to get started. Good evening. Thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm Chris Wiley with Roseburg Public Library. And it's just a pleasure to welcome author Jennifer Greer from the Oregon coast. This is the first of several online events that we have planned this fall. So next week, on Thursday, September 17th at 6:30, we'll welcome Eliza Canty Jones of the Oregon Historical Society to discuss the women's suffrage movement. And mark your calendars for Thursday, October 20th at 5:30 p.m. The library staff and I will be working with Blue Zones to really talk about books that are coming out this fall, hot titles. We'll discuss Jennifer's A Desperate Place for sure. And you can go to roseburgpubliclibrary.org, click on events for the entire list of programs. Now I'm pleased to welcome Oregon author Jennifer Greer. A huge congratulations to her for publishing her first novel. This is an amazing accomplishment and one that really needs to be celebrated. A Desperate Place is a thriller set in the Medford area with a ton of action combined with realistic autopsy scenes, and it features two fantastic main characters. Jennifer began her career as a journalist who traveled the world and then moved to Medford to raise her children. She now lives, as I said, on the coast, where I hope she's working on a follow-up to A Desperate Place. Thank you for joining us, Jennifer, and I'm going to let you take it over.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, for inviting me. This is a lot of fun. And I think I want to start out mainly because my book is based in Medford. I would like to start out talking about the conditions that are going on there now with the fires. I raised my family in Medford. I lived there for almost 20 years. And that was part of why I wanted to base my book there. But I still have a lot of family living there. And so the day that the fires started in Medford, we had this terrible windstorm here on the coast. So we had no power and no internet. And I get a phone call from my dad, and all I can hear was his voice cutting out a little bit. We're staying in place, evacuation, fire. I had no idea what was going on, and I couldn't find out till the next day. So I had a couple of sleepless nights, but fortunately my family is safe. And I just wanted to say that I have some prayers for the community because it's a terrible, tragic thing. And I did find on Facebook, there is a new Facebook link to Southern Oregon Fire Info for people who want to get information regarding where to go for food, clothing, and all that type of thing, and updated stories from the community. So it's called Southern Oregon Fire Info. And so to get back to my book, it is based in Medford. And one thing, Medford is in this valley, beautiful valley, but it's got wineries. It's got the Ashland Shakespeare Festival. It's got the Brit Festival for concerts during the summer. You've got lakes and mountains. And I just thought, what a great place to base a thriller. And so I did set it in Medford. Now, I want people to realize that the title of my book, A Desperate Place, is not a reflection on Medford. So it is a metaphor. So A Desperate Place is a metaphor for the state of mind that I found the victims in my book. They were all struggling for maybe what I would say identity, and they made decisions based on it out of desperation. So A Desperate Place was, for me, a great overall character statement for the book. So it is not necessarily that Medford is a desperate place. So anyway, so moving on about why I became a thriller author. I think some of the foundation for that came from the fact that I was raised an Air Force brat. And my initial 4 years, 5 years was raised in Bitburg, Germany during the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. So there were sirens that went off regularly. Khrushchev had threatened to blow Germany off the map. And John F. Kennedy was shot while we were there. And I could distinctly remember my mother crying. And even though I was very young, I think some of that, sort of unsettled stress maybe became part of me and my life. And so for some reason, I tend to sort of gravitate toward stories that are sort of sensational and thrillerish. Um, but, I really had a great childhood. It wasn't one of those dark story, Stephen King type stories where you had problems in your childhood. But mine, I was raised in Tucson, Arizona, mostly. My family was a Southern family, and they were religious, or we were religious. I mean, every Sunday we were in church, and every Sunday evening we were in church, and Wednesdays we were in church. And if there was a traveling evangelist, we were there every day of the week. But I enjoyed the companionship and the potlucks from that. It was awesome. I don't think my parents were really surprised that all of that church going didn't seem to have much of an effect on me. It didn't have the desired effect anyway. I was always into some sort of scrape or other. It's kind of like I was a Huckleberry Finn type female character. So, I had this, my mother said I was free spirited. And I was. So, I was gone from morning till dusk in the summer. And when school was in session, I was, thinking of anything but actually sitting at the desk and being in school. So I didn't have the best grades. But the one thing that kept my attention when I was in school was story time. I absolutely loved when the teacher would start reading. I mean, I so could relate to that. I was lost. I was in the story. And I didn't really even connect with that until many years later, that the reason for that was because I loved stories and writing. And I think, I was the free spirit. I was, I have two siblings, a brother and an older sister. And I just thoroughly enjoyed, I was the miscreant youth. I tormented them actually. My brother was 3 years older, and he was sort of a germaphobic at the time, and I just had the best time tormenting that poor guy. But he got even with me for cutting off all the hair on my Barbies. I mean, it was tragic. But and then my sister was awesome. I mean, we shared a room, and she was 5 years older than me. So I got to really torment her because she was in the early teenage years. I remember when she first got her license, I snuck into the back of the car. She didn't know I was there, and she drove away. And it's dark, it's at night, and I pop up in the mirror. I don't think she ever forgave me for that one. I mean, the brakes slammed on. I'm lucky I didn't go through the front windshield. Honestly, it was pretty bad. But I thoroughly enjoyed my youth. But then later, people have asked me, how did you do in school? Were you really academic? And the answer to that was always no, as far as my childhood went. And I don't think anybody in my family expected me to go to college. And I ended up being the first member in our family to ever go to college and get a degree. And from there, I'd kind of like to launch into my characters, McKenna and Riggs, because that is where I discovered my character, McKenna. I was absolutely certain when I started college that I was going to get a degree in literature, because when I was about 11 years old, my mother found a poem I'd written in my bedroom, and she said, "Jennifer, this is it. You're a writer. This is wonderful." And, I didn't really believe her, but she was a self-taught literate. She came from a poor Southern family, didn't even graduate 8th grade, but she taught herself all the classics. I mean, she read everything. And something in her connected with what I'd written. And so I kind of remembered that later. And I went back to college, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna get that degree. Well, I went through all the credits, And then I started watching the Gulf War on television, and I thought, this is so exciting. And there, the reporters were right in the action. You know, they were embedded, and I said, I want to do this. So I switched gears and went into journalism. And I went into Berlin for a foreign correspondence seminar. And the awesome thing is, while I finished the seminar, and then the Croatian War was going on at the time. And I convinced a couple of students to rent a car with me and go into the war zone and cover the women and children refugees, because we had heard stories about, concentration camps and genocide. And I thought, this is my kind of story. So we drove down there, and the experience was exhilarating. At the same time, it was horrifying. I mean, we were held up at gunpoint numerous times. We were 5 miles from the front lines, and we stumbled, we were exhausted. We stumbled into this youth hostel thinking we're going to crash on a mattress in there. No, it's this big walled building, and we opened the gate to this wall, and we had stumbled into the Croatian National Guard's secret ammunition depot. So of course, I mean, all these AK-47s were pointed at us. They're locked and loaded, and there's this guy on the porch going, "Oh, okay, who are you? What are you?" And we're holding up our presses and screaming, "Press!" But they were friendly, thankfully, and they escorted us across town and gave us the lowdown, and everything was closed. There was no way out except one road. And we managed to get out by hiding in the forest and watching tanks go by, and just the whole experience. I thought, this is it. This is what I want to do with my life. That didn't happen because life happened. And I ended up married with 2 little babies, and my husband passed away in a car accident. And so the first couple of years of that, I mean, it was full-time parenting, and I didn't have a chance to do any more freelancing. And then after that, I just fell in love with parenting. I was 100% there. I loved it. They had the playroom, the backyard with the climber. I mean, the field trips, they had it all. I just enjoyed it. I loved teaching them. But then we came into, over the time, I began to realize, I really feel like I'm still sort of brokenhearted. And it was because I never got to be the journalist I wanted to be, to write that out. And during those years, I did try to write a couple novels, but I just never finished them. So, this is my word to people who really want to write. Finish the story, finish the book, because it's never going to get published if you don't. And my daughter told me years later that her favorite time was the night I would spend an hour reading them, to sleep at night. But then I would go in the next room and I would start working on my novel, and she'd go to sleep listening to that tap, 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 tap on the keyboard. And that was so soothing for her, So I ended up starting this novel when the financial crisis hit in 2008, and I couldn't find a job. I was like at home, okay, this is it. This is when I'm supposed to write. And I did. And that's how this book got started. So I'm not sure if I'm talking too much and you want to ask me questions, or no, keep going. Okay. All right. Well, and then I have also had a question. How did I come up with my character Riggs? And Riggs is an interesting character as far as thriller characters go, because you're either a detective or you're a medical examiner. But when I was doing research for this novel, I originally started out thinking I really want to research something that a journalist would research, and then infiltrated into the storyline of a novel. And I started to cover human trafficking, because it was pretty big in the news at the time. And as I was covering that, I was following leads that led me to the Ukraine they were working on embryonic stem cell research. And that led me into the science of it. And I just got hooked. I was like, wow, this is it. This is really what I want to write about. But in order to really tell that story, I needed a medical examiner in my book. So I thought, okay, who do I want that to be? How do I want that to be? So I called the local medical examiner's office in Medford. And Tim Pike happened to be the medical examiner detective. It's a unique position. Nowhere else I found it. And his job not only worked with the medical examiner doing autopsies, but he was also the eyes and ears for the medical examiner out in the field. So he would go out, collect the bodies, investigate to determine cause of death, and he would also notify the family members. So his job was, it was very emotional. You're collecting the dead, and sometimes, they didn't have the truck available, whatever. He would, wrap them up and put them in the bed of his truck. Medford was a small town. It's grown some since then, but the unique position he had really gave my character Riggs a bigger chunk of the storyline. So she got to share more of the investigative aspects of it with McKenna. And so my character Wit and Riggs, as I was writing the story, just slowly began to become friends. And I just kind of let it go. I thought, well, this is, at first they were supposed to be opponents, because a journalist and the police do not really click. But somehow they started to become friends because they'd both kind of gone through some dark times. And anyway, then eventually when I was able to sell the story, that editor, and I don't know if you have questions about that, so I might save that for you. That editor suggested that I enhance that friendship even more. So in my rewrites, I did add some more scenes and deepen that relationship. Did you want to ask questions about that? I'm not sure where you start, and
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer, for giving us that preview. Talk a little bit more, if you don't mind, about your decision to really feature two main characters. That can be kind of unusual in the thriller world, and the challenges that's now presented for you.
Yeah, well, actually, when I first began, I could only identify with McKenna because she was the journalist that I always wanted to be and what wasn't able to be. So I thought, well, I'll live vicariously through this character, and she can go and be anywhere while I'm finishing raising my children. At the time, my kids were in junior high and high school, and then I clocked that year when I first started writing this book. I clocked 5 to 6 hours a day in the car as a taxi driver. So, although I wasn't actually working, I literally was working, but so my research into these characters, it took longer than I expected. And as that time went by, I became to really identify more and more and more with both characters. And Riggs, I had a very close friend who also, like Riggs, had melanoma and had part of her face, a little area of her face removed. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough, if you looked at her. But the actual process of it and how she went through it was so courageous and so amazing to me that is part of how I created Riggs. And so the two friends, as we were friends in the real life, became these characters. And when my publisher and my editor said, oh, well, we'd like to deepen this more, I had written scenes in this novel from the viewpoint of the killer. But instead, we took those out and replaced them with more scenes with these two characters so they could deepen their friendship.
That leads me into asking you to talk a little bit more about the publishing process and how that has worked for you.
If somebody's watching this that wants to be a writer, maybe you should look away right now, because this was like a 40-year process for me. I really started writing when I was about 20. I did write about 6 chapters of a historical romance because I was reading a lot of those at the time. And, I found that work that I'd started about a year ago, and I'm reading it and I was totally absorbed in it. I thought, I could have been published 40 years ago if I just finished the thing. So that keeps being my refrain. Finish what you're working on, even if you're not 100% sold on it, because maybe there's, some confidence level there. It's a new project. You've never done this before. Just finish it. But as to my actual process, when I did finish this novel, it took about a year, 3 months of research, about 9 months of writing. But I spent another couple of years doing rewrites and finishing raising my kids so that they were off in college. And after the rewrites, I started peddling it when I finally had a finished product. And I happened to send it to an agent that I'd met in Hawaii at a writers conference years and years before, like 20 years ago. And I had occasionally sent her some new project I was working on. And when she got this book and it was finished, she sent me a note back, even though she rejected it. She sent me a note back and said, you know, you have to be the most tenacious writer I have ever met. She said, good luck. And so I continued to send it out. And let's say I got a lot of rejection slips on it. So then I would tear it apart every once in a while and rewrite the end or whatever. But eventually it became a whole finished product and I just let it rest. I tried sending to agents, getting an agent. I tried sending to publishing houses, but eventually I just let it sit for a few years. It was in a drawer while I went and lived my life, you know? And then one day I decided, you know, I think I'm going to pull that out. I still believe in that project. And I looked up 10 agents. I thought, well, I'll send to 10 agents. That's not a lot. And that gets me out there again. Well, within a week, Mark Gottlieb from Trident Media contacted me, gave me a phone call, and signed me. I was trying to explain this to my husband. I said, you don't understand. You don't understand. This doesn't happen to people. This doesn't happen to me, but it did. And it was like a miracle. You know, I couldn't believe it. Honestly, I couldn't. 2 weeks later, I signed with a publishing house. Mark sold my book to, it's a smaller publishing house that does strictly suspense, mystery, thriller. And they were wonderful. You know, Crooked Lane Books was great. And the editor, Jenny, was awesome. She gave me amazing help while I was doing my rewrites. But they signed. Now, we did get some rejections over the 2-week period. My agent got some rejections, and it was really actually helpful. You know, normally when you get rejected, you don't see anything, just, you know, no thanks or whatever, if you hear back, you know, 6 months later. But these were for publishing houses sending emails to my agent. So he forwarded them to me. So I was able to read them, which was wonderful. And I would get things like, what an amazing amount of research into this. I can tell, you know, she really went to bat on this, but this is just too dark a story for our publishing house. Or, you know, loved it, but it's so similar to an author we already carry, it wouldn't be right to do that. Or, you know, I loved the storyline, but gosh, it's just so gruesome. We don't really publish too much that leaning right now. And so they were nice rejections, but they just didn't fit them. So, you know, writing, as everyone knows, is subjective. So unless you click, it's like dating somebody, you know, you might date 50 people, but you click with one person, you know, and that's how editors and agents, you know, see your writing in your book. They either visualize it and connect with it, or they don't.
Well, you mentioned the gruesome nature of it. There are pretty intense autopsy scenes. Tell us about your process for creating those. When you followed this medical examiner in Medford, did you get to go in and do some actual visualization?
I did get a tour, but not during the autopsy. Now, I could have maybe signed up for that. I don't think I even asked. But one of my favorite authors ever is Tess Gerritsen, and she writes a, you know, sort of leaning toward the medical thriller, very graphic, descriptive. You know, she's got a character in her book that is a medical examiner, and then also Patricia Cornwall does, you know, medical examiner, also that, and Kathy Reichs. You know, these are all authors that I had read, you know, everything they'd written. And so for that character, I had a sense of what I needed to do to make her real. And so I got online, and there are, believe it or not, there are a lot of videos out there of actual medical examiners performing autopsies. So I watched a lot of those. I sent out emails. I got information back. I got books on it. You know, back before the internet, I used to practically live at libraries. I mean, I carried mounds of books home for research all the time, and I always had a late fee. I mean, yeah, it was forever a late fee. But I loved it, you know. But now with all of this, I was interacting online with people who actually have the job, so I could get firsthand interviews, and it was wonderful. But I did spend quite a bit of time on that.
Well, it certainly shows, and I also wonder how much of the cast of characters, because you really introduce us to a lot of different people in that area. How many of them are based on real life,
Uh,
and how did you come to dream up some of these folks?
you know, it's funny when I'm writing a scene. Um, I'm not really taking into account the entire story. I see it the same way you would be seeing it if you were watching a movie. I see that scene literally come alive in my head, and I can see characters, you know, enter stage and take part in it. And I'm just thinking, well, you know, it's just how the story, I want to share this information. I want to share that piece of information. I need a character for that. And so, honestly, the only character in my book that came from Medford was Tim Pike, the medical examiner detective. Everything else I simply made up in my head. I went online to sheriff departments and you know, cruised through some of their dialogue and their pictures, and um, I studied the network of how Medford is set up as far as how they handle murders and uh, crime, as far as uh, they have a system in place, you know, that I had to really learn, and I needed characters to be able to develop that. But I made them up. I mean, really, it was fun. I loved it.
Well, it was fun to read too, because you know people like them. They're very authentic.
Oh, that's great to hear, because you know, I like I said, I see them, and I don't just see them as if I were watching that scene I'm writing. I try to visualize it from the perspective of the reader who hasn't seen it or heard it, and everything is new to them, and they're just now being drawn into that scene. To I want them to be there. And so, you know, my character might walk up, and at first he's just a sheriff, and I just see him as this guy with his hat. And I thought, oh, I'd love it if he had a cigar, and that was really not what you're supposed to be doing on the scene. Or he was, you know, not from the area, and he had a southern accent, and his face was like really deeply pockmarked, and he talked really slow, like somebody you just really wouldn't put a lot of confidence in. No, 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 this guy is super sharp. He's an attorney, and he could be, you know, practicing law. Instead, he's a character in my book that's solving murders. So, you know, I just wanted to make it interesting.
Well, it really is that. And I want to get back to the thrillers in general. Often focus on plot, and it's really fast paced. And of course, A Desperate Place did that. There were a lot of twisting, turning roads, and a lot of fast action, but you did spend quite a bit of time with character development. How, as a writer, do you balance those aspects? And is one piece easier than the other to write?
My characters, I have kind of evolved as a writer. This first book, the first book I ever put together from beginning to end, I didn't realize when I started how many moving parts would be, you know, flying through the air at all times, and then trying, oh, that was 6 months ago I wrote that scene. Wait, no, that guy had blue eyes, not green. And, you know, so trying to nail all that down, I had copious notes, and I had, you know, alphabetized, you know, it was just very difficult. I have since embraced and love and absolutely adore Scrivener. So it organizes everything for me. I can file all of my characters. I give them complete bios. I collect pictures so I know what they look like off the internet. I usually choose, you know, like actors or, you know, whatever. And it, detailed outline of what their history is like, because what's happening on the page while you're reading comes from the history of that character. And I need to know all that before I can introduce their quirks and, how they would process a scene. Um, and then how those scenes evolve. And then I do copious amounts of research with everything I do. I kind of can't stop myself. Once I start on it, I really have to have it all. So in Scrivener, there's a section for storing your research. And, I've got, 40 articles stored in there and they're all highlighted but it's wonderful. But when I start a character, my particular way of doing that, I get this huge whiteboard and I've got my markers and I'll start with a name in the center. And then from there, it's just, by the time I'm done, the whole huge whiteboard is covered in ink and it tells all of the relationships and their history and all. And then I take a picture of it and then I upload that picture into my Scrivener and file it under that character. So, it's very detailed. It's to start the writing process. I have to take a lot of time with that first, but I cheat and I start writing scenes. If they start popping into my head, I'm like, oh, I don't care if I have everything. I have got to write this. And I make it as creepy or as whatever I like, I set the mood. And so that keeps it fun.
We have a question from someone who's watching us, and she asks, how did you learn about tumors and this one in particular?
Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to do any spoilers just in case, but this particular one, I was studying, you know, the US is a little bit slow to come on board a lot of science because there are human rights involved. And when you get into studying things like embryonic stem cells, if you go overseas, like to China or to Ukraine, you find that there's all kinds of experiments going on that you won't find here. And that's how I found that, because in the US, of course, it would never be allowed. But over there, when I was studying human trafficking, bizarrely enough, the stories I read suggested that there's actually a mill. The young ladies are used for human trafficking. When they become pregnant, then they remove the pregnancy from them and experiment. So there's a lot of really bizarre stuff going on that, of course, would not be found here. But when I started getting into that, then I got into the embryonic stem cell research, and then it led to this particular type of tumor. And I was like, oh, wow, that is perfect for a thriller. You can't write this stuff, right?
If truth is stranger than fiction, often.
Absolutely, yes.
We have another viewer saying she lived in the Applegate for a few years in the 80s, so she loved the familiar setting. And she loved the relationships between the characters of the newspaper as well as the others in the story. Are you writing a sequel to this story, and will these other characters be featured? I am intrigued by the idea of developing those relationships further. So,
Okay.
spoil alert. Tell us what's next, Jennifer.
Well, I can give you a teaser. This has been a common thread. I've been looking at um, all of my reviews on Goodreads, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and the common theme, even if they had something they didn't like about it, or whatever, everybody has their own idea of things. But the common thread is that they love these two characters and they want to see them again. And this viewer wants to see more about the characters in the newspaper as well. And yes, all of the same characters are going to be back. A little bit different roles, but I originally, McKenna was going to be a solo player and it was going to be books set all over the place. But because I have these two characters now together based in Medford, everything is going to pretty much be the same. And I have 2 more books outlined. I've started the second one, and right now the working title is A Twisted Place. Again, a metaphor. And it's going to be very character driven, but very similar with the same players. And it will definitely have some really interesting twists. I think you'll find it very difficult to figure this one out.
Yeah, I had trouble figuring this A Desperate Place out. Did you know that piece of it? Do you know who's the bad person before you write, or did that come to you during the process?
No, I think while I was writing the storyline itself, I do a timeline, and I'll, sort of, okay, do I want this story to take maybe 2 or 3 days? Do I want this storyline to go for a month, 6 months? And that helps me figure out the pacing of my writing, the scenes, and when a bad guy, there's always a bad guy, when that person is gonna, step into the story. Um, but yes, I always know. And in this case, I knew I had to have that particular type of serial killer. And I didn't want just a serial killer who kills for the sake of killing. I wanted somebody who was motivated by something really deep, but at the same time, there were actual, bizarrely reasonable reasons for doing what he's doing. There was a weird method behind all of that. So in the next one, there is it's a little bit different in the way that that the bad guy unfolds, but I think it will be just as intense. Let's put it that way.
It seems that the book would be so easily adaptable to the screen. Have you considered that? Has anybody approached you with some film rights?
Well, no, not yet, but I have had a number of my reviews say, hey, I can really see this in a movie form or a series. I would love to see this. And so I think I'm going to give a little nudge to my agent. And actually, Trident Media does handle that type of contract as well. So we'll see. Right now, with it, there has been some hiccups with the pandemic because my book was supposed to be in stores everywhere, right? Well, a lot of bookstores were shut down for a long while, and so they have a backlog, and they're really hesitant to buy new authors because there's no guarantee that that book's going to sell. So it's been really difficult to get my book actually in the stores. Amazon and some of the other stores, the smaller stores are carrying it now. All of them carry it online. That hasn't been a problem, and I'm trying to set up something with Powell's in Portland to sell signed copies for me, so people can order signed copies through Powell's. So that's up next. But like I said, I visualize this like a movie when I'm writing it. So I'm kind of not surprised that these are the comments I'm getting.
One of our other viewers said she just placed a hold on the book. And yeah, we have a couple of copies in physical format here. We also have digital copies through our cloud library and Overdrive platforms. Is that in the background an audiobook on disc you have?
You have a good eye. Okay, yes, this is audio, so it's available on audio as well.
We'll make sure we get that. Who read that and how did that?
Um, this is Kristen Potter. Now I got to choose her. I got to listen to various readers, and she also reads for Tammy Hogue and I think it's Karen Slaughter. Maybe not Karen Slaughter. I can't remember, but some really great, well-known authors. And I liked her voice and her pacing. And so I've had some good comments on that as well so far.
And I'm also seeing in your background lots of books. So
Yes.
tell us some authors or books that you've read recently that you're recommending.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to branch out because I've been pretty focused the last 10 years on suspense authors. So I don't know if you can see what's going on here. I have a wall of books. So I've been Debbie McComber. I've been reading, Nora Roberts, Luann Rice, Danielle Steele. I've kind of gone a softer route than the thrillers. But my favorites, Tammy Hogue, I just finished one. Gosh, I've always loved her. I think it's called, I got it right here. I'm going to do a plug. Tammy Hogue, The Ninth Girl. That was one of my favorites of hers. And I just finished it about a month ago. But I'm going to confess, during this pandemic, the past 6 months, I've had a terrible time trying to focus, stay concentrated. And I think I've heard that from a lot of people, my concentration level just isn't there as much. So, I'll get, a chapter in, and then suddenly I lost my focus. So I've had trouble finishing, and I told my husband, I go, I don't think this is fair. I'm getting my book review during a pandemic when people are frustrated and fed up. It's just like, I'm going to get terrible reviews, but thankfully, no, I'm getting good ones.
Well, we just appreciate the time that you've spent with us, Jennifer. Author of A Desperate Place, your first novel. Congratulations, amazing accomplishment. You said it right at the beginning. Um, People need to recognize how amazing this is, and the story, and how quickly after you brought it back out, it sold, because that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. And so it's a wonderful accomplishment for you. Congratulations.
Thank you. I got the best review from my brother, and he bought it because he couldn't wait. And he called me up and he said, I had no idea that my own sister could write like John Gresham. This is amazing. So that was great.
That's wonderful. And thanks to everybody for joining us on Facebook Live. We're going to sign off. Come back next week. We're going to talk about the women's suffrage movement with Eliza Canty Jones. That's Thursday, September 17th at 6:30, right here on Facebook Live at Roseburg Library. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.